Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. On this episode, we have a special guest returning, Tonille Miller, who's an organizational psychologist and the founder of EXT, Experience and Transformation. And I always appreciate you being on our podcast, Tonille, because you bring so much wisdom to the table here. For those of you who haven't met Tonille, she's an accomplished speaker and author and for a book called The Flourishing Effect, which is a fantastic read, by the way. Today, we'll be talking about something else that Tonille has written recently here, an article that she published called Thriving in the Age of AI, How to Collaborate Effectively with Digital Colleagues. This is something that we've talked about a little bit in the past, just a tad, but I'm super excited for this very focused conversation because your article was spot on. So welcome, Tonille.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
I'm glad that you are here. So can you tell everyone a little bit about your background, what you do, and how you got into this whole field?
Yeah, thank you. So I started in the big consulting firms, done a lot of work as a consultant. I've also been in-house, and a lot of my work is really around either driving change and transformation, which a lot of that ends up being technology implementations and AI strategy and implementations in today's world, as well as a lot of work around like mergers and acquisitions, culture transformation, and then the employee experience as a whole.
Gotcha. And you're really good at that because I've heard you're speaking on some other podcasts and they are great. So today with this article you published, you mentioned some things about the workplace is changing and changing rapidly as they're increasing more digital workers and these AI enhanced agents that are doing additional work to collaborate with humans. But how do you envision the balance between these AI capabilities and the human skills evolving as we see this change in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. It's definitely on everyone's mind. And I think we need to think about it in terms of it's going to evolve into a more strategic partnership rather than a competition. That's how I always try to frame it for people. Like, it's not, I'm losing my job. It's like, we're going to really be able to leverage AI, as you and I have talked about. We were kind of dabbling in that, and it's super fun. And I think in that case, AI is going to be handling all that repetitive, data heavy tasks, and they're going to be doing it with much more efficiency, which allows us as humans to do what we do best, which is that critical thinking, the emotional intelligence, the creativity, that type of thing. But I think the key here is going to be integrating AI in a way that enhances the capabilities of humans rather than replacing them, as we mentioned. And so I'm finding that organizations that succeed in this evolution will invest in reskilling, upskilling, ensuring employees can leverage the AI as a powerful tool rather than, again, viewing it as a threat, which some are in that camp today. I think the other piece to call out here would be leadership, right? I wrote an article today, as you know, about this and how leadership is really going to need to shift because they're going to have to prioritize adaptability, that ethical decision-making framework, and then that human-centered design to create workplaces where both AI and humans can thrive together. And I don't know that a lot of them have done that up until now. So that's going to be new. And then I think ultimately, again, it's going to allow the humans, I think, to do that much more meaningful and purposeful and creative work, which they actually prefer, right? A lot of my work is in employee engagement. A lot of the disengagement comes from the fact that modern work is still based on that industrial era model where we stripped the work and the tasks of that creativity and the ingenuity and really that meaning and purpose and commitment that comes with seeing that end product and how it impacts the end user. So I think it's all good stuff here, but I do think that we need to be careful about how we go about it.
So you mentioned the leadership having to make this transition to adopt, and I know that that's not this article; it's another article, but it kind of feeds right into what we're talking about now. The challenges that are faced as you take this balance between the human skills and the AI skills. How can an organization or the organizational leaders embrace this in a way that that will take them from that industrial age thinking into the more AI-based thinking? Is there some mind shift, some kind of reframing they have to do to kind of get into that mindset? I'm just saying that because as I see this, and we've seen it in organizations as we've talked with them, there's a desire to get there, but it seems like the whole infrastructure of the organization is so aligned with a prior era that
Hmm.
it's difficult to make a transition. So how do you see that transition happening realistically in an organization that is kind of set in its ways currently?
Yeah, that's going to be the $1 million question. I think a lot of it is just, again, being aware, leaders being aware that, oh, those old mindsets, although we all know they weren't working recently, but they definitely aren't going to work in this new world. I think there's just that awareness piece. I think that everybody kind of having this, creating a psychologically safe environment where we know we're experimenting, we know we're going to get some things wrong, we know we're iterating, it's not going to be solid right away. I think having those in the background as a foundation is key. And the other thing too that I see kind of trips leaders up when they're doing this is they're shifting from, or they're thinking, oh, good, we're going to get AI. That means we're going to get rid of these people over here and we're going to just automate everything and it's going to be this and that. And so I would really caution them to take a step back and shift from that efficiency to an intelligent growth mindset, right? So let's think of how the organization and our employees can have that intelligent growth. So growing smartly, sustainably, that type of thing, elevating the human potential, being very strategic and thoughtful about it versus just saying, oh, let's buy this AI platform and, give it a go, kind of a thing. Like that's not going to work here. So I think those are some ways they can get started on that.
That makes sense. So, when they do that though, because it's inevitably they have, selected some AI platform and they are already dabbling with it. Um, how do you see that transition though, or how does it impact the roles of the people who are in the organization right now? Because you can look at it and argue, well, if I'm bringing in AI with all these capabilities, I may not necessarily need to get rid of all my people because they have some deep experience. We don't just want to flush that away. But their roles are going to change. So how do you see that transition happening? It's beyond a simple like upskilling. Well, I can show you how to use ChatGPT or Claude or one of the platforms to get some of this work done. But how do you see their roles actually evolving as they adapt to this new AI capability?
Yeah, and you're right. Again, this is another important question. I'm glad you're drilling down on this one. So I think again, it starts with the mindset of kind of having all the stuff we just talked about in the back of their mind, meaning we don't know all the answers. We're going to be trying things out. But also, I think a good way to do this is piloting. I mean, I would recommend this with any new technology, but especially with AI for all the implications you mentioned. Let's start piloting. Let's try having AI take over this particular task of this particular role, see how that goes, test it out. You can do this stuff quickly. It doesn't have to be forever. You can do it in a couple of weeks' time and really see what you learn from that. And I would say gradually do it. You gradually take off those more automated whatever tasks. And then again, okay, so let me stop. Here's a caveat though. It all lies in how we position it from the beginning. It's not just what typically happens is we bought this platform, go use it. We're going to implement it. Great. No, we need to really, I think, take a very big step back. And this is where leaders really need to get clear on this from the very beginning at the very highest levels is when you're looking at your AI strategy and where you want to have this responsible growth and how you want to do it, you need to think through all these kind of change management, I think, tools ahead of time before you tell anyone you're doing it, before you launch, before anything, because you're going to have to come up with a narrative ahead of time. That's going to be that North Star. So when things do get tough, you have this language, you have these key messages, you have this stuff to talk about. And it's not just random, oh, you just do this and that's happening. No, it's got to be very thought through and it's got to really incorporate the human. Otherwise, you're going to lose all your employees and there's going to be a lot of fear in the organization, that type of thing. So I would say, first of all, leaders need to get very clear on why are they implementing AI? What are they looking to save? What are they looking to accomplish with it? What's that business case? What's the narrative? What does it look like in the future? How is it benefiting the employees? Get down to that level and really do some thinking, maybe co-create with a few of them and really understand how it's going to impact them psychologically in their roles, all of it, and then understand how we can get in front of that resistance and help them feel more comfortable with it because you will need them to use the AI first. Before you ever go right to AI tools, you're going to need them to gradually kind of feed them data and do all the different things that people are going to have to be doing with them. So I think you got to really get clear on that narrative and lead with that and keep that consistent story going so that people understand why we're doing it, where we're going, when is it going to change, like how it's going to happen. And then once you have that, then you gradually start piloting, then you gradually start trying things and iterating and gradually, I would say, transitioning different tasks and different parts of roles to the AI. And then obviously that will ramp up, but I think you got to start slow.
That makes sense. So you touched on two things, which kind of lead into back was one of the things that you mentioned in your article, related to data literacy and emotional intelligence. So both those things, they tend to be, in my mind, on opposite ends of the spectrum. Because I think of emotional intelligence, I think of the empathy and the caring and the and the support that you give to other people versus data literacy, which sounds very clinical and very IT focused. So how do you balance that within this kind of new way of working, especially if maybe the employees never really had to think about one or the other, honestly?
Yep. And again, this goes with that narrative. This is why we want to do that upfront work as leaders ahead of time so that we can account for exactly this, like questions like you just asked and questions that employees are going to ask, like, how do I have to upskill? What do I need to know? Why do I need to know this stuff? Why is data literacy now important? To your point, never had to know it before. Why? Emotional intelligence. I already know how to talk to people. Like everyone thinks they know how to communicate. They think they have emotional intelligence. Most of the time they don't. And the fact is because they think it's like air, like, oh, we just automatically do it. That's a problem. So to answer that question, I would say, first of all, when you think about like the developing data literacy, I think it's really the way to think about it is what can a person do that AI can't, right? So you want to really critically analyze and think about the AI outputs, right? So AI is going to give us awesome recommendations, awesome text, that kind of thing. But you got to understand its limitations. You got to understand that it has biases, as we all are aware, probably. You got to understand, I would say, the underlying logic of it so that you understand what it's giving you and what it can't give you. And in that, employees can ask questions like, why is the AI suggesting this? What is the model? Like, how have they been trained? Who trained them? What data is it using, right? Are we missing data from certain populations or certain parts of the business? What are the assumptions and biases that are built in? So just like questions like that, just kind of, again, it's not the same as emotional intelligence, but it's just really taking a step back and just asking why. I would even just ask why 5 times and just really get down to it. And I think the cool thing is you can take a lot of courses for free or, low cost. You can experiment with the AI platforms and your workflows. Whether it's intelligent automation or it's, analytics, whatever decision making. And then I think another thing that's really cool is, again, there's a lot of podcasts like this one. You can read blogs, listen to these podcasts, that kind of thing. And I think that's a really great way to kind of get upskilled there. So that would be one thing I would say, really focusing on that data literacy. And then the next thing, to your point, developing emotional intelligence. Do not write this off. Don't write this off as I already know it. It's the air I breathe, because it's not the case. I mean, I've been studying this forever and I'm still every day trying to find new ways to have more emotional intelligence and better communication skills. And so with this, again, I think it's that self-awareness piece, right? No matter whether you're a leader or an employee, individual contributor, I think, we all know that like AI can analyze those trends, but we as humans need to interpret those trends with our intuition and the context around it. So that, again, it's emotional intelligence, but you're also leveraging some of this critical thinking. Like, how do we tell that story, right? And you do that, I think, by getting more clear. And this may sound touchy-feely, but it's just legit. It's just, I would say, high performance mindsets and skills, which is self-reflection, mindfulness, doing things like that, whether that's meditation for you or it's journaling. Journaling is a great thing, right? It's not hokey pokey. It's literally just writing down whatever's in your brain. You'll start looking at it and realizing, wow, that's crazy. I didn't even know that was in there. So I think that's important. I think with that, improving the interpersonal skills is, again, just practicing. And again, you can get class. It's not weird to get classes on emotional intelligence. I think that's a great thing, whether you're reading a book about it, listening to a podcast, whatever. But you practice role play, like active listening, empathy, just trying to put even something as simple as, if you don't know where to start, put yourself in whoever, whether it's your customer's shoes or someone else's shoes, maybe it's your relationship, just think, knowing what I know about this person, how would they react to this? Or what would they be thinking if I was saying, just like different things, just get out of your own head is what I'm saying here. And just really kind of understanding what's going on in that other person's mindset so you can understand from their perspective. So I think that's big. And then really just adaptability and resilience. And again, this is hopefully easier for the younger folks because they have grown up in a world that's moving so fast and everything's changing all the time. But I really caution the older employees and leaders where they're used to change being like a 10-year horizon and not a 10-minute horizon, and things like that. I think you got to really upskill in your adaptability and resilience there, because AI is going to move even quicker and quicker. This is the slowest it's ever going to be working, and the worst it'll ever be. It's going to get better and better every day. So I think just kind of keeping that growth mindset there handy. And then again, with the ethical reasoning piece too, that's also important, right? Just thinking about what the ethical implications are of the data, of the output that AI gives you. And if you can merge both of those skill sets, both of those toolkits, I think you're going to be unstoppable.
So what was going through my mind and why I was laughing a little bit was that some of the things you were saying, the things that came back to me was, these are the things that my kindergarten teacher taught me in terms of emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of funny how we've learned them at some point in our life, and then we either unlearned them or became more selfish as we got older. But it's interesting. But to go back to one of your points, you bring about all these potential training and activities that people can do to increase their emotional intelligence, their literacy. How does an organization measure the benefits of these skills on the team? I mean, they send them to the classes. They suggest specific courses they could take either for free or for paid. Um, how do they say we were here and now we're here and there's some measurement? How can you see that, or how can you tell?
That's a really good question. I've done quite a few projects like this where it was literally for either RPA, robotics, AI implementation, sort of thing. And part of the change management plan was, again, building these bite-sized learning and training and on all that and role playing and all those things. So we built that into it. But then to your point, how do you measure that? Because that is important, because it is expensive sometimes. And even if it isn't, it's still important to see. What we did and what I would do with probably most changes in general would be thinking through, whether it's leadership or whoever's driving the initiative, thinking through what are the demonstratable and hopefully measurable behaviors that somebody could demonstrate for each role or each level or whatever you want to call it, that would demonstrate that new skill. So for example, if that skill that we want them to learn is emotional intelligence, we need to think about, like, what does that look like? Maybe for a individual contributor, like a junior associate, that would be something like, um, ha, you know, are they, are they listening in meetings? Do you see them actively listening and kind of nodding and doing those different things that they're learning in the active listening class? Are they doing those and demonstrating those in meetings? Or, how is their communication skills? Are they just, sending off texts and it makes other people, like, there's a lot of ways you can go about measuring it. It depends on what it is. But again, those top, soft, they call them soft skills. You can definitely measure them, but just what you need to do is ahead of time, set the expectations and break them down into what you need people to be doing on a behavioral level. And then again, if you can measure it, it's a bonus. Lots of times you can. And then also tying it to their performance review, right? So if like, for example, PwC did this really well, where anything that we were expected to demonstrate, whether that's giving feedback to people or, demonstrating this or that or the other thing, we knew from the very beginning of the year, like, this for my level, these are the 5 behaviors that I want to be showing and demonstrating as much as possible. And the cool thing about that is it gives you things to shoot for. Because if someone just says, oh, you have to just demonstrate emotional intelligence, you take this class on it, that's great. But unless you're just amazing and you want to implement it right away, no one's going to implement that. It's like, oh, I learned stuff. Cool. Great. But if you have this little card in front of you or this little post-it on your computer, whatever the case may be, it says, these are the 5 exact behaviors that you do in a meeting. You maybe say this on a call, whatever. If you know those things, you start by practicing those just to kind of get comfortable with them. And you do them more. And so then you know what you're doing, you know what you're aiming for, but also, again, you can measure it and you can say at the end of the year, I learned this skill. I demonstrated it in, 5 meetings and that was recorded, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of ways you can go about it, but it's a matter of being deliberate about it.
That makes sense. And I've just come up with a fail-safe way to measure this, especially for emotional intelligence. You fill a room with puppies, and then you let the employee go in, and it depends on how long the puppies stay with that person and how many times their tails wag. That will tell you if they've made improvement over the year, and it'll be a whole lot of fun to do. Anyway.
That is a great idea. And that would definitely tell you something about their energy, because dogs are so smart. Dogs and kids, they can sense people's energy 1,000%.
That they can do. All right. So now we have these amazingly smart people who are now emotionally intelligent and data literate. And you have this fantastic capability with AI that's amazing. And your platform is running at full speed. Describe a scenario where this human and AI collaboration would actually lead to some productivity or innovation.
Yeah. I had a recent client, and I'll give you 2 examples. One was my client. One was just something else that I think is a little bit more interesting. But my client actually leveraged AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants to transform their customer service operations. And so again, this is call centers and things like that. And what they found is by integrating AI with the human customer service reps, they were able to enhance engagement of the employees, right? Because again, their job, the menial, boring stuff is going away, and they get to kind of have the more interesting phone calls, basically, where they're actually using their emotional intelligence. So it increased productivity as well and efficiency while maintaining that high level of personalized service for customers. And the way they did this was the AI system would handle basically the routine inquiries, like, with quick solutions, super common customer service problems, whatever, super easy stuff that really is boring basically at this point in time for the human agents. And then the human agents would, again, tackle those more complex, nuanced issues where the customer was upset about something or there was a big problem. And so they would handle that, and it would kind of be that escalation of the support model, which was great because they actually helped them, and they got to upskill in emotional intelligence and psychology to do that role. So it was kind of a win-win. So they got to get upskilled there. And this led, I think overall, it was basically they found higher response times, reduced operational costs, and then again, improved customer satisfaction. So that I think is one cool example, which a lot of companies have been doing that for a while. So that's not super groundbreaking. But another thing that I heard about recently was in the healthcare space. And this company used AI to accelerate their drug discovery process. So this traditionally, I think it takes years and lots of funding and that type of thing. And the AI basically just worked alongside the scientists to identify the promising compounds and the potential therapeutic targets more rapidly. So it saved a lot of time and energy. And again, that's kind of the boring stuff for a person to do. And so in this, the AI was analyzing all these biological data sets and they predicted which molecules might be effective in treating specific diseases. So that provided basically a short list of potential drug candidates. And then scientists took the AI's insights and they combined them with that in their medical expertise to validate the results, conduct experiments, and then refine those drug formulations. And then as a result, they saw I believe it was like the collaboration, it basically reduced the time required to identify the drug candidates. I think it went from several years to just a few months, which is huge. And then that really sped up that research process and it cut costs. And then again, it's kind of, again, it's a win-win because it's taking the boring, more monotonous, mundane stuff away from the scientists themselves, the employees themselves, and giving that to AI. But then they're kind of QAing what the AI comes up with.
That makes sense. And obviously, I've read a number of articles similar to that, and it's amazing to see the gains that are being achieved through that kind of collaboration. But how do you foster that culture? I mean, because it sounds like the employees will see the benefits themselves of being maybe doing less of that kind of stuff, and maybe in the scientific work, they'll see, oh my gosh, we were able to cut the time in half, or look at all the discoveries we're able to make in such a short period of time. That itself sees some benefit. But what if you're in a financial services organization and you're looking at doing research on companies for investments and whatnot? How do you foster that culture between the humans and the AI to maintain that same level of, oh my gosh, look what I've done, when the results or the output may not be as earth shattering as developing a new drug to fight some disease?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think, and again, to your point, it actually does depend on the industry, I think, because everything's so nascent right now. And again, some of it's not that sexy. So it's like, oh, wow, I saved an hour, which again, an hour is an hour. But I think just like any change or any culture change, I think there's a couple things. First of all, leaders have to create that environment. So leaders have to really make it a point to say, this is important to us. This is part of our XYZ strategy to do blah, blah, blah this year, this new AI platform and saving the time we're going to save or having the higher quality output, whatever that is, setting the tone for that in the very beginning of how it contributes to the strategy and tie that to bonuses and incentives and their comp in some way, right? Saying, hey, if you can save 20 hours this month, you get XYZ bonus, whatever the case may be. So those are some tools you can do. The other thing is leaders need to talk about it. So maybe in your weekly meetings, your town halls, whatever, you're telling stories like, oh God, Joe at the finance desk over there saved this amount of hours and did this whole cool thing with the client, whatever the case is, just a quick little story about how it happened. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking. It can be something very simple and just be like, hey, that was really cool. Joe got to have that extra hour and he got to go have a long lunch that day. And then we're getting to a really important point right here is that the big question here is too, as people are saving time with their work, because a lot of it is efficiency, who gets that time? Who owns that time? Does the employee get to work less hours and get paid the same? Are they supposed to throw those hours back into the company and do more work? I don't know. I think you need to have that discussion with your teams, leaders and their teams, but determine what that is and then make sure that we're talking about that. And whatever the case, whatever the decision is in your company, make sure that's top of mind. And what I would say is, even if you want people to give all those hours back to the company, let's give some sort of a bonus, right? Like, hey, you get an extra hour for lunch or Fridays off, whatever the case may be. As you increase more efficiency, if you want people to do this, you got to make it as easy as possible for them to do it. You got to make that there be some benefit. Otherwise, why do they care to save 3 hours, right? If they can't use that on their own time. So I think that's really important, setting the culture, setting the tone. Again, creating that environment where people are talking about it, being rewarded and reinforced for it. And again, I think wherever you can build that into the way the organization already operates is really important. Again, if that's, performance, incentives, disincentives, that type of thing.
So looking at that, you're mentioning the efficiencies and some of the gains that maybe the company is experiencing. Do you think that there's a way to inbuild some benefit for the employees who are seeing this new efficiencies in a way that allows them to see maybe a different path from a role perspective, or being able to be an entrepreneur to support that, transition from, I just did this in the past and now, yes, I'm giving all these hours back, but now I've actually seen, or I've used my creative thinking and my understanding of what we do here at this company to make that next step. How do you encourage that to say, yeah, you're getting all these benefits, but look at what you can do then with your career? Is that something that we can foster within a culture?
I love that you asked this question. I feel like nobody's asking these questions because they're thinking about AI just like any technology where it's very siloed. Like, well, marketing's going to implement Salesforce because we want to do this over here, but you're not thinking about these implications downstream, which is, yes, you're going to have more time. Yes, this is going to happen. That's going to happen. And that's what a change manager or a good HR person, I think, does. You kind of journey map whoever's being impacted by whatever technology you're implementing and saying, okay, not just what's changing in their role today when we launch this platform, but then downstream in 10 months, when we save this much hours and this happens and they don't have this part of their job anymore. What does that mean? What does that look like? And so that work needs to be done up front if you want this to work out. So I love that you asked this. I think, yes. And this is where you can get really creative. And again, you have to be not operating in silos, because whether you're in HR, you're in marketing, you're in the business, wherever you are, you need to be partnering with the other teams. Because, for example, let's say this is an AI platform and it's in the business or it's in marketing and they're saving this time like we're talking about. Well, guess what? They probably need to be talking to HR, to your point, and say, hey, we're not going to need to hire quite as many people next fall because of this platform. Or we're not going to need people that have XYZ skill anymore because we have this platform. And or all these people that are having hours that work for us right now that are getting freed up, can we build some sort of an internal marketplace with gigs they can pick up for a few hours? Some companies like MasterCard do this. They use Gloat, for example, and saying, hey, if you have like 10 hours extra a week, or you're in between projects, or whatever the case may be, there's different like internal projects that you can either get paid for, or some of them don't pay, but it's still a fun, stretching learning opportunity where people can pick this up on a platform. So there's things like that. There's reverse mentoring, there's cross mentoring, there are apprentice programs. So I had this in one of my jobs where I had this learning and development team, and they basically built this apprentice program, which is really cool because we didn't have a lot of resources. We couldn't hire more people, but we had a lot of projects coming. So we built this apprentice program, and slowly but surely over the course of like 6 months, folks from different parts of the business were like, ooh, I want to learn instructional design. I got 5 hours a week. I'm going to shadow that person. And gradually, as they shadow and they learn it, they could gradually take on more of those bandwidth, more of those projects. So different things like that. There's lots of creative ways to do this, but I think the main thing is not operating in silos and really thinking through, again, maybe we're not going to see these gains for 10 months or a year and a half, but think through, what are we going to do with those people, to your point, so we can grow and stretch them and make them a better version of themselves when they leave us, because they have more time. Otherwise, no one's going to use it. Or if they do, they're going to be on Facebook for those 10 extra hours a week. So we need to really get clear on that, of what we want, why we're doing it, what we're doing, and how you're going to benefit from it.
That makes sense. So you opened up a whole new door here. You mentioned HR several times. And when I think of HR, I don't think, and again, maybe because of where I sit within our organization, I don't necessarily think of the proactive planning that you just mentioned and organizational design as a traditional standard operating procedure through all the digital transformation that's happening. With AI and the AI enhanced capabilities from all these digital workers being brought in and collaborating now with these intelligent people who have been emotionally intelligent and they know data literacy, there needs to be someone who can understand and bridge that gap between the current state and a potential future state. Do you see that as HR? Do you see that as leaders working with HR? Do they even understand how it will impact them as they go into the future? Because some of the activities that these folks are doing may be, like you said, oh my gosh, I just noticed I could do X, Y, and Z. And now I've transformed something just because I have this capability available to me that wasn't planned for. No one understood it when they started making their 1 year plan in January, what's going to happen for this year. So how does that work? How can an organization embrace this, I guess, continual chaos, if you will, change that's happening with roles that could be very flexible? I mean, you mentioned the MasterCard thing and people having time and extra. How can they take that and balance? I have these very skilled resources who now have been provided incentives to be entrepreneurs and offer, with all the technology and their skills, but yet a, an output of I actually need to get the work that we do done and grow our business. How do you connect those things?
Such a good question. You have the best questions. Oh my goodness. Well, I would say this is a lot of what I do. So, but I am an outside consultant. Sometimes I've been internally on the strategy team. Sometimes I've been on HR, but I rarely see someone that does exactly what you just described in an inside role. Because again, to your point, like it's like I'm HR, I do payroll, and I'm marketing, I do this, I'm in the business, I do that. But they're not thinking that kind of more broader cross-functional mindset, which is why they bring in a consultant, which is fine. You can bring in consultants. I bring them in or at least have somebody in the organization. I've actually started to recommend that people have like there's a chief transformation officer or something like that, where you're like a chief experience officer, something like that, where you're literally looking across every strategic initiative in the company, everything each part of the business is trying to drive, all the HR stuff, all the tech implementations, all that. You're literally seeing across all of it. And you're having a mindset like mine is, where it's like, or someone that does this work where you're bridging the strategy, the execution, and the HR, the people side, all that all in one. And so you're literally building almost like a heat map of saying, okay, so we have all these initiatives coming. These three over here are going to hit marketing this year. This is going to hit our more junior people here, like really building that visual, if you could, so that everybody sees if and when and how all these things are hitting people. And then to your point with that, building that forecasting ahead of time, like whether it's things that we expect. So maybe we implement this AI platform and we do expect efficiency. We don't know how much. We're thinking it's maybe like 10 extra hours per person a week. But to your point, we also are making, maybe doing some scenario planning where it's like, hey, maybe Joe will, save so much time and he's fiddling around with this other thing over here because he has some extra time. And all of a sudden he discovered how to cure cancer. Like, I mean, literally that's big, but I mean, things like that can happen, in the business. So to your point, I think that planning needs to account for what we do expect in the efficiency gained and things like that and the changes. And, again, to your point, building the programs around it that can offer them more things to do with their time. Or, hey, if you save, I know some companies are saving, are basically saying things like, hey, for every 10 hours of your work you save using AI, we're going to give you a 1% bonus or something like that. Like literally just building those ideas, like a menu of options. This is what's available to you. And then if you do this, then that happens, or then you can go do these three things over there. So I think really thinking through that ahead of time, whether you're somebody internal, like I said, at that higher level that sees across everything, or you bring a consultant in. But I think you definitely need to be thinking about all these things.
Gotcha. All right. Last question is, how do you get started with all this? Because we talked about a lot, and it seems like there could be a whole lot that needs to be done within a specific organization. That maybe they're not as mature on the AI side. Maybe they have a bunch of very, very skilled people that have been around for a while in a mature industry. But with all this new AI coming in place now, they realize they have a whole lot of upskilling to do. So you have this heavy load of upskilling, this massive concept of redesigning the organization when they don't necessarily understand what that means or how do you accomplish that. What kind of steps do you see getting started going from zero to something?
Yeah. And I think it depends on what your role is and how zero to something you are, like where you are in that space. But what comes to mind for me is just kind of putting my change management hat on right away. Is I would, again, whether it's your first AI platform or your first AI strategy you're embarking on, or your seventh, doesn't matter. I would say let's get real clear on what we're trying to accomplish. Again, what's that end game? What are we trying to accomplish and why? And really, write that out, get the business case, get the benefits, get all that stuff, break it down to who's impacted, how it benefits them, all that stuff. Just having that in your mindset ahead of time. And then I think from there, again, understanding what the impacts are, making sure that you've built your use cases in there. And then I would say it's so broad, right? Because it just depends. But I would say maybe start piloting. That's a good place to start. Start piloting, start testing, start iterating, document all the stuff you're learning, get all kinds of feedback, co-creating with your people. Even if you don't bring everyone in, definitely bring a nice big cross section of employees like on the ground in to kind of test it, pilot it, give you feedback, and create that psychologically safe environment where they can tell you this sucks. We're not going to use it. This is why it won't work. Like asking those questions because you really want to know. Doing all that work, I think, is good in the very beginning. And then as you're learning and as you're kind of seeing in the business landscape of what's coming down the pike and what your business needs, continuing on iterating that journey and make it very transparent to everybody at every level. Like we're on this journey to do X, Y, and Z with AI, blah. You know what I mean? Whatever that is, kind of keep updating it, iterating it transparently as you go. And then with that, as you start doing it, just keeping in the back of your mind, these things we just talked about today. Like, do we need, after a year and a half, do we need to start redesigning our orgs? What are we doing with the forecasting and the planning for this team over here who's seeing major efficiency gains versus this one over here who's not seeing much? Like, just kind of, again, just thinking of it in a very holistic way. I think just trying some of these things on, just really taking that change management mindset, I think, and then just continuing to iterate. It's not just what we're doing, it's how we're doing it. Continue to iterate that we're not going to get it right every time. It's a psychologically safe environment. Everybody's just testing and iterating. Give us your feedback. Like, all those kinds of things are part of that cultural mindset as you're doing this.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you for all of that wisdom and insight that you just brought, because there's a lot that can happen within this space. And I really appreciate you bringing a perspective that is outside of what, at least on our podcast, outside what we normally talk through and what a lot of people who listen to the podcast think through. Because first of all, they aren't organizational psychologists and they don't have the experience that you do. So seeing this from an outsider's viewpoint is very, very helpful. And I think it's been a really good conversation today. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.